Hello everyone and welcome back to another round of Tuesday Night Legacy. Tonight we have Dead Guy Ale versus Death Shadow. We have on the left Carlos coming back with his Dead Guy Ale list from a couple weeks ago. This deck is a white-black list that is designed to use things like Dark Ritual to get early advantage with Hymn to Tourach and Thoughtseize early game, following it up with a Dark Confidant or Stoneforge Mystic on turn 2, trying to close out the game as quick as possible with an early Cauldron Complete, or it can play the very, very long game with a Bitter Blossom, Lingering Souls, and a Kaya or Liliana of the Veil to kind of grind out that advantage throughout the game. Getting across the finish line with things like Dathi Voidwalker and Tourach Dread Cantor. On the right, we have Lawrence playing a Death Shadow list. Now, this deck, of course, is a famous modern deck that has been ported into Legacy with very good results at our store. Death Shadow being the 13-13, gets -X, where X is your life total, but it loves to play all sorts of things that dig away at your life total, like Street Wraiths and playing full sets of Watery Grave and using Thoughtseizes to bring your life total down. It even has Snuff Out. You can pay 4 life to give +4/+4 to your Death Shadow out of nowhere, perhaps winning the game with that. And of course, it runs a package of counter spells to make sure that it can push through that damage. And why not play some Murktide Regents, because you're filling up your graveyard anyways, and get this guy down super early like the Delver decks do. So we have discard versus tempo. Let's get started. We see Lawrence starting off here with a Scalding Tarn, probably into a Volcanic Island if I had to get... No, of course not. It's a Watery Grave, because we're going down to 17. Maybe shocking in for a Thoughtseize here, taking 5 damage. No, sir, I gotta quit guessing when I don't know what's actually going to happen. We have a Ponder. Gonna look at the top 3 cards of the library. Likes what he sees, puts them back in the order he likes, draws the top card. Starting out on the other side of the board with a Dark Ritual into Thoughtseize, 2 mana floating. So this Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, making it so that all lands are also swamps, going to be able to tap for that Dark Ritual. The Thoughtseize, taking a look, takes out the threat of the Death Shadow, even seeing these 2 Force of Wills in hand, but identifies that trying to throw down this Dathi Voidwalker and getting rid of most of Lawrence's hand here, because he has to pitch that Force of Will to a Force of Will unless he would get rid of the Baleful Strix as well. That does not happen, so the Force of Will is out of here. We see a Wasteland for that Urborg. Another Thoughtseize is going to take out another Death Shadow. We just have the Baleful Strix coming into play here. Just a little 1/1. Not too much of a threat here. Does get to draw a card, so Lawrence doesn't have much of a hand anymore. But Carlos is low on mana at this point. We're seeing a Hymn to Tourach from Lawrence, getting rid of some cards for Carlos. Discarding some Planeswalkers here. Going to pass the turn right back. Still doesn't have any mana. Just 1 damage coming across the board. Both players paying tons of life in order to cast the spells that they want. This is Lawrence's plan, not really Carlos's plan. Seeing another damage come through, just drawing a ton of land. Mana Flood versus Mana Screw on display. You know, in 12 turns here, Carlos is going to have to pack it in. Oh, he does find a creature, though, the Dathi Voidwalker. So, talking about this guy earlier, he got countered. A 3/2 with Shadow. Can't be blocked except by creatures with Shadow, and can't block things without Shadow. But one of the really cool things about Dathi Voidwalker is it has a Leyline of the Void stapled to it. And even more so, as cards get exiled, you could sacrifice Dathi at some point and cast one of those spells from exile, which is pretty cool. If you really wanted to. I don't see a lot of people do that, though. I think it's more relevant just to stay in play, exiling those graveyards. All right, we're finally starting to find some mana here. 2 mana, 3 mana. Seeing a Liliana of the Veil. Everybody's probably pretty familiar with her. Seeing 5 mana. Hard cast Force of Will. Don't want to see Lily in play. Could make him discard. Could also make him sacrifice the 1 creature he has in play. Baleful Strix's not doing a ton. It's gotten in, like, what, 3 damage so far? Lauren's definitely playing off the top of the library here. Seeing a Ponder. It looks like a Murktide Regent. That might be useful. Trying to close out the game here. If he can Murktide with the full 5. Let's see here. He plays the Murktide this turn. And it's an 8-8. Down to 10. I think he's going to be 1 damage short. He might also not have the full 5 suite of sorceries. Indeed, he doesn't. So this is just coming down as a paltry 6-6. Murktide Regent. Only come down with 3 counters. We're seeing an Umezawa's Jite down to 2. All right, we got to make it happen. Lawrence knows what this card is. Got to be able to kill this Dathi right now. Down to 3. I don't think he found it unless he's slow rolling. Nope. I think we're on to game 2. So game 2. Carlos up a game here. We're seeing a Thoughtseize to start the game. Taking whichever card he wants. Getting rid of a Swords to Plowshares. Early removal. Always good. Must have a way to deal with this Stoneforge Mystic for turn 2. Not very scared of it. Also, a lot of stuff stranded in Carlos's hand since he doesn't have... It doesn't look like he has another land. Fetching with that Marsh Flats. Going to go ahead and get basic Swamp. Probably a good idea to not fetch into the 3 Wastelands in Lawrence's deck. That looked like a... yeah, I was going to say. Here we go. Wasteland of his own. Blowing up that Watery Grave. Fetching with 1 Scalding Tarn. Finding another Watery Grave. Going again. This time we're going to grab an Underground Sea. We're done taking damage for now. 2 mana and 6 cards in the yard. There's the Murktide Regent. Or it's 5 cards in the yard. But it's still fine to have a flying 5/5 on what could be considered turn 2. I think it's like turn 3 or turn 4 at this point, with Wastelands going back and forth. We see a Daze for that Stoneforge Mystic. Looks like that was always Lawrence's plan. I think that card in Carlos's hand is a Rest in Peace. Exiling Yards. Now, fun fact about Rest in Peace, when all of those cards exile, they are leaving the graveyard, so that Murktide Regent being in play does have that fun line of text that says whenever an instant or sorcery leaves the graveyard, get a +1/+1 counter. So unfortunately, a Rest in Peace after a Murktide Regent is resolved is going to pump the Murktide Regent most of the time. Is this a Thoughtseize? Very fancy Thoughtseize. Trying to decide. He's got a Death Shadow, a 1/1 Death Shadow, and a 6/6 Murktide Regent. Fatal Push. He's going to Daze his Fatal Push. You know, I'm not entirely certain what the point of that was. I'm sure it did have a point. I'm not sure if it grew the Murktide Regent, since replacement effects say that it doesn't actually go to the graveyard in the first place. Where's that Rest in Peace? Exile Yards. Exile instead. So I'm not sure, but in any case, that was lethal for Carlos. So we are on to game 3 here. Thoughtseize is taking Dothy Voidwalker. I guess Lawrence playing his own Dothys. Didn't see any in his list he gave me here. Must have been some new sideboard tech. Force of Will for the second, or no, the second Thoughtseize taking Force of Will here. Tourach Dread Cantor coming into play. Now this is a decent card. Protection from white. If you kicked it, then it had Hymn to Tourach attached to it. Whenever a creature or whenever a card gets discarded, you get a +1/+1 counter on Tourach. But the super relevant text in this matchup is Protection from White. Exiling some cards with Kaya Orzhov Usurper. Plus an up there. Tourach coming in, 2 damage to Kaya. Now, Carlos does have ways of getting rid of this Tourach. Whoa, is that a Tidehollow Sculler? We'll see what Lawrence does here. He's going to brainstorm. An excellent response to something trying to eat your hand. You get to put your best cards back on top of the deck and then present a hand full of either lands or cards you really don't care about. Looks like Lawrence is going to present a ton of counter spells, a Brainstorm and a Death Shadow here. Tidehollow. Tidehollow Sculler, of course, getting to take a card while it's alive. And then once the Tidehollow Sculler dies, the card goes back. Kaya did get to plus up here, so barely staying alive. Tidehollow Sculler can't block Tourach, as it does have white. Stoneforge Mystic, that's not going to deal with Tourach either. We're going to need a Sudden Edict, I think. Well, let's see here. Sorceries. Thoughtseize. Yeah, Sudden Edict from Carlos to deal with the Tourach, but with Lawrence holding so much removal, so much counterspell. There goes one of them. He exiles the Force of Negation to get that Force of Will. Saying no thanks to the Stoneforge Mystic. Seeing a fetch here. Another Watery Grave. Shocking it into play. Maybe he's going to finally play that that Death Shadow he's been holding on to. Oh, it looks like he's got 2 Death Shadows. Start with a Brainstorm. Why not? Make sure that all your options are open here. Might Thoughtseize to make sure... Yep, here's the Thoughtseize to make sure the way is... Oh! 3 Swords to Plowshares? Oh, Carlos must be so sad. 3 of these removal spells can't get rid of this Tourach. Can definitely take care of any of those Death Shadows you want to put into play. But this 3/2, this on-the-ground Delver, unblockable, it's eventually going to close out the game. Although if he keeps putting down tasty Planeswalkers, then maybe not. Going to see a Swords to Plowshares. Brings Lawrence back up to 13. He's trying to think, is it worth it to exile my yard or exile your yard? Always exile your yard. Probably gonna lose this Kaya this turn, unless he drew the Sudden Edict. Sudden Edict, a very good removal spell with the split second. not being able to respond in any way. There goes Kaya. 2 unknown cards and a pass. We're going to see Ponder here from Lawrence. Holding on to that looked like a Brainstorm and a Daze. There's 3 damage coming through. A Thoughtseize. And a Brainstorm in response. Do the same old game. Maybe just keep 3 lands in hand. Who knows? Showing him Brainstorm. What looks like Murktide Regent. Yeah, that's the one I would get rid of too. And Death Shadow, which is only a 1/1 right now. So now you just know to play around Daze. Wasteland is going to cap Carlos's mana even more than it already is. 2 mana for a Rest in Peace. Exiling the Yards. Well, we need to draw this Sudden Edict now, but I guess it's not even worth it. Yep, that's going to be it. So it looks like Carlos couldn't find that black removal that he needed, so Tourach Dread Cantor rode him to victory with that protection from white for the final game, putting Lawrence up 2-1. Hey guys, I just want to say before my pre-recorded self cuts in here that we have some very interesting stuff coming up in the future, and I hope you all stick around and tell your friends about how cool Tuesday Night Legacy is. All right, kick it over to that other guy. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more of this content in the future. We have a bunch more of these on the channel, so go check out our backlog to see some other premium content. If you're curious about a deck you saw played here, the deck lists are always in the description of the video below. Thanks as always to Spellhold Games for letting us play at their store, and we'll see you next time for some more Magic content on Tuesday Night Legacy. Bye!